Hi, this is Steve Michelotti of the Azure Government Engineering Team. I'm joined here today by Zach Kramer, lead of the Azure Government Engineering Team, and we're here to talk about DoD Impact Level 5 on Azure Government and some of the new activities we have going around here. Welcome, Zach.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
Okay, so why don't we start out by just talking about the basics on what are we talking about here with DoD Impact Level 5 on Azure Government?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to do is frame up is obviously Azure has a very broad compliance portfolio. We've talked about this a lot of times, and in particular within the U.S. government, we have coverage that looks at FedRAMP, covers our DoD certifications, CGIS, IRS 1075, and even the ITAR and DFARS. But today we wanted to call out and specifically talk about the DoD Impact Level 5 accreditation and some new things that we've been doing to work with the DISA, the DoD regulator, on expanding our capabilities for DoD Impact Level 5 to bring more commercial capabilities to our DoD partners. So this is something that a lot of people have been asking for, and so we're really excited to be rolling this out.
So this is an important distinction because we've always had some DoD capabilities with Impact Level 5 as well as Level 4, so it's really double-clicking on the expansion here.
Correct. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is take a look back at what we've got. So over the past few years, we've had Impact Level 5 accreditation for Azure Government, and we've expanded that scope gradually over time as we've added new services. And as you can see here, we have a list of services covering things from analytics with Event Hubs and HD Insight to pure compute and even higher-level compute services like Azure Functions, a host of networking, identity capabilities, and then a robust storage portfolio. And this has led to over 36 services. This is more than 3 times our closest competitor here. So we've really done a lot of work to bring this capability.
And it really ranges the whole spectrum. You just pointed out anywhere from IaaS, compute, all the way to PaaS and serverless.
Exactly. And we did this by building 2 dedicated regions at Impact Level 5. So these were dedicated for the DoD, and this provided them the isolation that they requested. But we've been working with them over time and partnering with how do we expand and enable more and faster innovation to arrive to the DoD. And to do this, what we really wanted to do was to be able to run Impact Level 5 workloads across Azure Government. And so what we're talking about today is we've actually enabled that workload with our December 2018 provisional authorization with DISA.
Okay, so before it was those 2 regions were DoD, the other 4 were DoD Impact Level 4.
Correct.
So now we're saying all 6 will have those capabilities.
Can run Impact Level 5 workloads.
Yeah.
And so this all started when DoD was thinking about this first, and when we were working with DoD, they had a few things that they were highlighting, right? They saw really the power here that a shared cloud environment could provide, lots of opportunities, commercial innovation, really bringing a lot of capabilities to help DoD modernize.
Right.
But that presents unique risks. DoD is a very unique enterprise. They're protecting the United States, and they have a lot of information and capabilities that they need there. And so that was where we originally started with these physically separate regions. Now, one of the things that DoD, even with foresight, put into the Cloud SRG was this idea that they knew requirements would evolve, and this is exactly what we've been working with them on. And with our latest provisional authorization, you are now able to run workloads in all of the Azure Government regions and meet the Impact Level 5 standard. So what we're going to do is take a look at what that looks like and kind of where we're going forward here.
Okay, cool. So the takeaway here is instead of 2 regions as my choices, I now have 6 regions as my choices for running Impact Level 5 workloads.
Precisely. And let's take a look at what that looks like.
Okay.
So the first thing we want to look at is the guidance that we're providing to DoD mission owners to understand how they implement Impact Level 5 workloads inside of Azure Government. Even before, when we had the Impact Level 5 was limited to the 2 DoD regions, we were asked about guidance like this. And so we took some time to put this together to help people understand what do I need to do when I'm building my workload inside of any of the Azure Government regions. So we focus on how do we do things like compute isolation. How do we do things like storage isolation? And so you'll see here we even outline some of our approaches and how we're thinking about this. So when we think of compute isolation, how do I ensure that DoD workloads are not impacted by other workloads that may be running adjacent to them inside of the cloud environment? And the second piece for storage isolation, how do I think about managing my keys? And one of the big differences here is that we're enabling customers to bring their own keys and manage the keys that encrypt their data. This ability to manage the keys that encrypt their data gives the DoD the ability to have control over their data and using cryptographic separation, separate their data from the rest of the data. This is what enables impact level 5 data to reside in the same pool as other data.
So it is really all about the separation and isolation.
It is exactly about the separation.
And when you talk about keys, it really lends itself to the fact that because you're running on Azure, you can use these services like Key Vault, which makes that management really simple.
Precisely. So we have done a lot of work to enable services from Azure SQL Database, storage, and various other services to enable them to use these keys that now put the control in the impact level 5 mission owner's hands. And so all of our services, when we expand the scope, if they host data for impact level 5 workloads and non-impact level 5 workloads, they will expose the ability to have keys so that an impact level 5 system can use those keys. Okay? And so as we look at this guidance and what it shapes up to be, you can see things here like Azure HD Insight, which is a great service that allows you to run, Spark workloads and other things like that. And so what we say here is basically HD Insight sits on top of storage accounts. It uses a SQL database. And so what the recommendation here is you need to use a SQL database that is using your own managed keys, and using a storage account which you also control the keys to. You can then deploy your HD Insight cluster on top of that, now knowing that your data is segmented, your impact level 5 data is segmented from other data.
And this table makes it really clear because it really shows you can run IL5 in any of the regions we have with these little tweaks on your configuration that you just mentioned.
Exactly. And if you go down, there are some services where we still say, because they have not surfaced those keys in that manner to control that you may just only use those inside of the DoD regions. And so we're trying to be very clear about where those options are and where those options are not. And if you come down here, there are also things where I look at, say, storage. If we look at our Azure storage, we actually even provide some guidance here, which is custom managed keys for storage do not yet support tables or queues. And so if you're trying to use those outside of the DoD region, we provide some guidance on how you can encrypt your data before you go in. And so this all gets back to the principle of the impact level 5 mission owner is in control of their data, where their data goes and how it is separated, and the keys that control that data. And so that level of isolation gives them the ability to meet the impact level 5 standard. Okay. So what I wanted to show next is really just how easy it is to implement these changes and give us this ability. And so the first thing I'm going to do is create a resource group. The resource group is going to contain all of the impact level 5 assets that I create. So I'm going to call it Azure Gov IL5. I'm going to put it in our Virginia data center, which is not one of our DoD ones, but we're allowed to create things there now, so we're going to go ahead and do that. So resource group created, great. I'm now going to go in and create a key vault, which is going to be the place where I'm now, as an impact level 5 mission owner, going to be in control of my keys. So we're going to call it Azure Gov IL5 Key Vault. And we're going to use our IL5 resource group. And we're just going to go down and use the default settings, which is fine. And we're going to create that key vault.
So we've got our resource group, which is a logical container of resources in Azure.
Yep.
We've created our key vault, and we're going to put everything in the same resource group. And that key vault is key, because, no pun intended, because as you just mentioned, the key management and being in control of the key management is such a central part of the IL5 process.
Yeah, and this leverages our backed up by an HSM that manages a hardware security module that is keeping the keys, so we don't have access. For instance, when you encrypt something, you can pass the data through the HSM. The key is not exposed outside the HSM, and this is the type of capability that enables us to give assurances that that data is protected. And as we've talked about in previous videos, our Azure Government Data Center, our operations staff are screened by DoD. We manage everything to the Impact Level 5 standard. This is now giving you the control to host Impact Level 5 data anywhere in the system that you want to go.
Right.
Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is create our storage account that we will then encrypt using keys that we store in the key vault that we had. So what we'll do here is we'll go down to the bottom here, and let's add a name. So we're going to do Azure Gov IL5 Storage. We're going to create that in US Gov Virginia. and everything else should be good with our defaults. So we're going to go ahead and create that storage account. Now you'll notice I didn't set the encryption key here, and this is actually an important detail while this is getting created. The encryption key is actually set after the storage account is created. And so you want to make sure that you've set that key before you begin putting data into it, because the data will only be encrypted with that key from that point forward. So if you've already put some data in it, it doesn't go back and retroactively do it. You can copy it and put it back in. But if you are once you set that key, then that key will be used to encrypt that data going forward.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. And
so now that it's been created, this is when we would create.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and go to the storage account, and we're going to come here to encryption. This is where it gets really complicated. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click Use My Own Key. Then I'm going to select it from Key Vault. I'm going to come in here to the Key Vault. I'm going to select the one we created. Great. And then as we scroll down here, we now need to create a key. And so there are no keys available currently, which is fine. And then I'm going to go in here, and as you can see, there's a few options. I could import keys. So if I have my own key authority that I want to import them from, I can do that. I can restore backups. I have some different configurations. We're going to go ahead and create a new key called IL5 store key. And then we're going to click Create. And what you'll see here is it's now created a new key. And you can see we're pointing to the key vault that we created, and we've got our key that we created. So I can go ahead and click Save. It's going to update. And from here on out, all of my data that I write to this storage account is encrypted. I could still, if I want to, encrypt on the client side and do that. But I know that any data I'm writing that's Impact Level 5 data is now stored in the storage account using my key that I manage with my Impact Level 5 cleared personnel and everything like that.
Great, and all that was set up with really just a couple of check boxes.
A couple of clicks. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to go create a SQL server, because at the end of the day, what I want to do here is create an HD Insight cluster. And as I mentioned in that documentation, there's a few pieces that you need. You need a storage account, you need a database. So let's go ahead and add a server. So we're going to add a SQL server here. And when we look at this, we're going to give the server a name, Azure Gov IL5 DB server. Okay, so we get a checkbox there. Give it a name. Let's try to type that again.
Always important to type the password correctly.
Exactly, you gotta make sure you can do it twice. Okay. Looks like we're good to go there. We're going to select our IL5 resource group again. I remember putting all that in that logical container together. And we're going to go ahead and create the server. So this is going to go ahead and create the server, and then we're going to put two databases in that server. And so what this is going to do is this is mainly for storing configuration data. Now you may say, well, I'm not putting Impact Level 5 data in my configuration, but the point is still we want to make sure that the whole environment is isolated and that you have control over those keys regardless of what you're doing as you look at these things. So that's where we're going here when we create this.
Something that also just pops in my head as I'm watching you create these, it's one thing that we give them the couple of easy bullet points on the documentation to show what configuration you need to do. And you just showed an example of that with the encryption that you applied to storage. But you can even leverage things like Azure Policy to enforce that. So yes, we follow directions, but I could create an Azure Policy to say, make sure any storage account I have in my resource group or subscription or whatever scope I care about has encryption turned on, and we can set that up as an Azure policy.
No, exactly. And this is one of the things we're actually working with the Azure Blueprint team and some of those things on, is how do we package those policies up in an Impact Level 5 set of combined guidance that will enable us to make sure that we have those policies in place so that anytime I'm creating an Impact Level 5 workload, those directions are in there. And so that will be coming out as we go forward.
Okay, so you've created the SQL server. Now we can add databases to it.
Correct. Okay, so we now have our server here. We're going to drill into this, and we're going to go down. And the first thing we're going to do is come down here into the security section to transparent data encryption. And so very much like storage, we're now given this option, do I want to use my own key, yes or no? And so I'm going to say yes. Again, this looks very familiar. I can go in here, and I'm going to say, what key vault do I want to use? I'm going to use the same key vault, and then select a key. Now you'll see here we have our previous key that we created from storage, but I don't want to use that one. I'm going to actually go in and create another one for SQL. And so I'm going to call this one Azure Gov IL5 DB key.
So totally consistent user experience.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so they're all connected together. We're going to go ahead and create the key. You see the key is now created. And then all we have to do here is click Save. It's going to save and basically make sure that all of the permissions for SQL to be able to access it are there. It's updating the transparent data encryption. And then from here on out, all of our data that's written to this database will also be encrypted with our key. So we're successful in that.
And this is good security practices anyway. So whether I'm IL5 or not, this is easy to set up.
Precisely. And that's one of the things that we recommend, regardless whether you're using any of the regions or anything like that. These are good practices for any of the workloads, impact level 5 or otherwise. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go in here and we're going to create 2 new databases. We need 2 databases for the config. So we're going to call this Azure IL5 DB1. I'm just going to create a blank database. That's totally fine. And then we're going to create one other database here. We're going to call it Azure IL5 DB2. Okay. So now, as a quick review, we created our resource group, which is our container. We put everything in. We put a key vault in that container. We took a storage account. We are now encrypting any data that's written to that storage account with a key that's stored in the key vault. We stood up a database server. We've ensured that everything that's written to that database server will be encrypted with a key that's stored in the key vault. And we've now created 2 databases. So for our final piece, we're going to go in here and create an HD Insight cluster. So we click Add. We're going to come in here and configure the basic settings. So we're going to give it a name, Azure IL5 HD. And we're inside of our subscription. We're going to pick a cluster type that is required. We're just going to use Spark as a default. You could do any of them that you wish. And then we're going to give it our cluster password. And then as we come down here, we see it's already defaulted to our IL5 resource group and US Gov Virginia. So we click Next. Now what we're going to do is we're going to configure our storage account. And so you see here, if I select my storage account, it comes up with a list, and I can select the existing storage account that was already configured with our key that is now in Key Vault. So this is where HD Insight will store its data. As we come down here to the bottom, it asks for 2 other things: a database that we can store the Hive configuration in, and then I'm going to come in here and provide the password.
So these are the databases we previously created, the number 1 and number 2.
Exactly, and these databases are on the server that is encrypting everything with our key that we specified. And so once we come down here, we'll set up the last bit of configuration, and then we'll be ready to provision this cluster. Okay, now we've got our passwords. We're all good to go there. We click Next, and it's going to go through and do the final validation. And so again, what we've done here is we've created our key vault. We encrypted our storage with a key in the key vault. We encrypted our database with a key in the key vault. We then connected for the HD Insight provisioning to put data in our storage account, to put configuration in our databases. So now all of our HD Insight data will be encrypted. And this, again, gives us the connection that we need. Now that our validation is done, we can create. Okay, great. So in conclusion, one of the things that we recommend as people go forward is to go ahead and review our Impact Level 5 guidance. You can reach that at the URL on the screen. And that will enable you to see all of the information about which services are available, what regions, what capabilities, and what configurations you need to utilize. So the docs we plan and are working on a monthly cadence to update, to add new options for isolation, to add new services that have made it through the DoD approval process. And this should enable you to build numerous applications getting the highest order capabilities that Azure has to offer, whether it's robust types of virtual machines, different types of high-level services like Azure Functions or things like this that all enable you to build Impact Level 5 workloads. So we're really excited about this capability and looking forward to get feedback on people using it.
Okay, great. This has been Steve Michelotti talking with Zach Kramer of Azure Government Engineering, talking about DoD Impact Level 5 on Azure Government. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.